Good day, folks. Oop, audio.
Morning, Steve.
There we go. Let's see. Looks like Melinda won't make it today. Oop, that's the wrong one, actually. This is the wrong one. And looks like people are already starting to fall off for the holiday season.
Just waiting for the eggnog to come out.
There's our password exposed.
That's me. Let me change it. I don't know.
Our very secret, secure.
That's not being used on the signing key.
Oh, that's awesome.
It doesn't ask for me to enter the name, but this time it did. So I thought it's asking for password. I didn't read the text.
If you click the link in the HackMD doc, it's got it embedded, so you don't have to do anything special.
Oh, okay. I haven't tried that.
I don't know. There is a calendar invite that was sent out that I think has a partial. So it is a little bit confusing. Here's the link with it embedded. Now you can reverse engineer what multiple sevens looks like when they're encoded.
Okay.
Or when I got hit enter to be.
Thanks.
Anyway. We did have one more thing on there around the extensibility PR, but Melinda got pulled into something last minute, so he messaged us and said that he wouldn't be able to make it. There is a PR, but let me, okay, I think that's where we were going to discuss. Let me just bring up something and I'll put it back in place of that and just we can touch on it real quick. PR. Here we go. 142. Just put my name on it for now. So all right. So welcome, folks. So first things first. We were going to move this to a later time. There was like 2 meetings left for the end of the year because I think this will be our last one for the year. So I just figured let's just kick it off for the new year. And I think, Samir, were you going to do a doodle poll?
I don't recollect that. I may have said I don't remember. Sorry.
So Samir and I will figure out getting a doodle poll out for January, and we'll use that for a new time, hopefully a little bit later. Because Shiwei, when does your time zone change again? Actually, you'll be off anyway.
Yeah, just let me check. It's not my time zone change, it's your time zone change because of daylight saving time.
So ours changes first before. Wait, does Shanghai not have daylight savings time?
No, we don't have daylight saving time.
Oh, okay. All right, so I can figure that out. But how long are you taking off for your own personal team building?
Personal team building, 1 month. That's 4
1
weeks.
month. Okay, and you think that'll start in the next couple of weeks? So somewhere towards the end of January?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we'll put a couple of dates out, taking consideration daylight savings time, and we'll figure something out. We'll get that as a doodle poll for folks. So that was the first thing I wanted to cover. The next was the PR for the Extensibility Framework. So I put that link in there. And basically where we're at, Melinda and Samir and I were talking about this of, just timing. So Anish was able to implement the Notary, the notation Azure Key Vault provider, and then wrote the code in the notation CLI to be able to call it based on, I wouldn't even call it a draft spec. It was based on the first version of the HackMD. The thought is that we would get the extensibility spec at a good, solid, stable point, and then we'd rev the notation and notation AKV provider to match that. But it looks like we're still churning on the spec, and we probably need to do more use of the current provider so we can use that as feedback. So we could either take the current spec where it's at right now, which we know is probably still not complete, make a code churn, commit that PR, make a code churn, get feedback, make another PR change to the spec, and then make another code churn. Or we can take the feedback from what we have right now and continue to review the spec and make one more code churn. So that's kind of where we left off, was let implementation lead the spec, let implementation and usage drive modifications to the spec. So that's the thought process there, that we did a little bit of inversion. So Shiva, I saw you did a bunch of PR feedback on, so I think we'll just see if we can get Anish to resolve those things. And the idea would be merge 142 and just start getting some more usage feedback on the experience. Thoughts, conversations? Notes. Okay, no additional feedback. So that's that one. And then Samir, this is where we were talking about scope, taking the Alpha 2 work. Let me just share my screen and I'll and share. Wait, was it roadmap? Yeah, not pull request, sorry, projects. And if I click Alpha 2 there, the thing that we wanted to propose was cutting in Alpha 2 so that it includes extensibility, and basically putting these things in Alpha 3 and just immediately starting on Alpha 3. The reason is this: the continued feedback we get is, don't make me compile from source, don't make me pull from some random branch, give me a release build that I can curl down and start using. From a security perspective, in addition to the usability problems, it's not too assumed as secure if we're pulling off of a personal repo for builds and so forth. So that's been the consistent feedback. So that was the thought, is just cut a release so we can test the end-to-end with remote signing in AKS, well, EKS, in our case AKS, but in a Kubernetes instance with the gatekeeper and ratify work to get some real feedback from users. And then the thing we were going to work on next, I think, Samir, was the policy work, which will drive the revocation.
I see what you're saying. Yep.
So what do folks think?
I think that sounds reasonable to give people a chance to test different features out, especially because we're going to be, we have the holidays and stuff, so it probably will be a bit of a break. So it's a nice chance to get what we have out.
Yeah, and I did have some users that did want to test things out over the break. In fact, I've got a meeting with a customer just this week, today or tomorrow. So we want to just get something that they could start giving us more feedback. It's one thing for us to be poking at it, but we really wanted to we've had feedback from users, from customers and users on conceptually, and they've done some of the bits, but until we can do some of the remote signing with their CA issued certs that they keep in their key vaults, that it wasn't really, they couldn't really dig in beyond like, hey, let me review this document and some random demos. So that was the push. Okay. So Samir, do you want to, the two of us can sort this and do that and basically split this so alpha 2, I always get draft 2 and alpha 2 mixed up.
Yeah, I think we can do that. If this call gets early soon, then we can just jump after this call together.
Okay. My cursor now. That was weird. There we go. Okay, sounds good. Next one was Pritesh.
Yeah, let me share this. I think it's about the Brandons here where we wait. Okay.
You want to just share your screen or?
No, it works for me. If you can share this, if you have opened the page, it works for me. So basically, we went to the only thing which we were debating about is basically renaming the notary to subject descriptor or subject, because the content inside that JSON node is actually a descriptor, not a notary content. So how about that? If does anyone feels otherwise that it should be notary, or can we rename it to subject descriptor?
I'm fine with either. It's just I'm holding out until other people say which way they want to go, and then I'll just get it rebased for you.
Any opinions? Or
So what dawned on me this morning, and obviously we can do lots of iterations. So let's think about what we would do. Like if we merge this change, this is in the specs. So we would still need to follow up with a churn on the notation CLI, and I assume there's some stuff in the extensions that would have to churn as well. Just what if, I'm trying to find it. Give me 1 second. Where is, sorry, I'm trying to find the signature one that we were talking about changing. Was it here? Where is the one where we talk about the signature format? Where we're starting to explore CBOR and
I think it's in notation or notary.
is it the roadmap or is it notary project? Actually, it's probably a notary project.
Notary project.
That's where the specs are. That's right. That's why I can't find it. Hold on a second. So my only thought was if we go down the cozy CBOR, does this reset what we would do here anyway? Or is that would just become the payload?
I'm not sure what will happen. I haven't looked into cozy how the payload will form there. Kind of. Like, but still we will need some kind of like, I'm not sure how it will work because different format is different way to structure metadata and things like that.
Anyway, what do you think? If we were to transfer to a cozy CBOR, would this signature format document change anyway? Seems like it would. It's pretty much yeah, this is the entire spec.
So I'm actually confused with CBOR because even if we use CBOR, the payload is still JSON, right?
So you're saying this portion of the signature format wouldn't change?
Yeah, so because the payload format won't change, so we still use JSON. But I remember that the motivation of to use CBOR is to get rid of JSON. Am I understanding correctly?
Mm-hmm.
Can we discuss this without CBOR because we are not sure and we don't understand it completely?
That's what I was wondering. Do we want to take this PR separately? Because until we cut a release of the spec, it could sit here as the interim. And then depending on if and when we switch, we can incorporate that. Like basically, we would just have to figure out the next version of the spec we cut. Where do we feel we want to be on this? Because I think this makes sense based on our current format.
True.
But I think what I'm suggesting though is until we evaluate this one, I don't know if we would go and rev the notation and notation key vault CLIs. I mean, I guess it's not a major change, so it might not be that big a deal.
I mean, I think on the code front, it would be a smaller change. We just need to update the JSON structure there. She can correct me here. But yes, it will break the existing signatures unless we do it in some backward compatible manner.
Right. Well, I'm not worried about breaking, right? Because right now we're not. We're working to get to that stable point where we say we will support quote backwards compatibility, because I assume at some point we'll start having enough usage that we do want to do conversions. Like I would make sure that we prepare ourselves for just prior to whatever we ship as our supported official release. The word GA is just you get confused between what we do in our products versus the projects. But whatever we declare as the final the release of 1.0 or 2.0, that's a whole nother conversation. That we might have a breaking change we want to make. So I'm just assuming the worst case and preparing for that, and then we can decide we want to cut. So having it doesn't really concern me too much. That's why I'm just raising it here for folks. Brandon?
Sorry, tabbed away to the wrong screen at the wrong time there. What was the question?
I just wanted to get your input. It was your PR.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I just threw it out there thinking we just had an extra layer we didn't need. And so if we can take it out, it makes sense, but it's not a hard requirement. It's just trying to clean something up a little bit.
All right, so I can't fix this here. All right, why don't we, if there's no, I guess my vote would be merge this for now, and before we do a release, we just take a checkpoint on where we are with the signature format, and we make another iterative change at that point.
So in terms of naming, do we want to call it notary or subject if we're going to merge it now? Because I need to rebase to
I see.
get it working.
What was the? Sorry, I'm taking a look here. Oh, this is.
There are people going back and forth of whether or not it should be called a subject descriptor.
I think subject is fine because this is the. Well, okay. So the only problem with subject is it does conflict Well, actually, no, wait, does this conflict with the way we use subject in the artifact manifest? Because they are the same thing. Basically, subject is saying this is what we're signing. And then in the artifact manifest, it's saying this is what it points to. So that actually is consistent.
I'm indifferent either way. I'm just leaving it open until the group says which way they want to go. And I know that looks like there's a merge conflict on it. So that's why I was going to rebase.
Anybody? Bueller?
Feel like half the votes are going one way, half the votes are going the other way. Need a rock,
The
paper,
other
scissors.
idea, subject descriptor was the other proposal.
Either it's fine subject or subject descriptor. I'm fine with any of them.
We did call it subject to the, sorry, go ahead, Maria.
If it's the same content as what's called subject descriptor elsewhere, I guess my vote would just be keep the same name to reduce confusion, unless there's like a really good reason to change it.
We call it subject here, and it's a type of descriptor. It was subject manifest, and we generalize it to just be subject. And it effectively means the same thing. Am I missing something in this signature format? I recognize I just drank my coffee. Like this is the signature format, and we're saying that this is signing the net monitor image. And this is embedded in the signature. So this is pointing to the net monitor image. And that's the same thing that this is. So having it match this seems to make sense.
I think the only reason I think the notary might make sense in this is that this file is for the payload for notary assign. And so whatever they're signing is under that notary field. But it's really not that important to me. It's more bike shedding than anything else.
By the way, if we call it subject, then I think it may be confused with SUB that is defined for JWT. Because SUB means subject, but subject in JWT means a subject string. It's not a descriptor.
Okay, good point. But it's called S, just to be clear, just because we did call this subject, it is called SUB though in JSON, where this would be fully spelled as subject. I'm just playing out different ideas here. Do the naming exercise. What are the names?
Well, just going off permutation, you could just call it descriptor, but I don't think that's right.
So the way we play this is when we used to be in the office, we would do this on a whiteboard and we basically say, no idea is a bad idea. We just write them down and you staring at them, it helps. So what are the names would we throw up here?
So JWT says the claim name should be unique. So yeah, that's one more thing. Unless it's reserved ones.
This is from Shiwei. I'm going to call it subject descriptor. Is that enough delineation? Feels weird calling well, noun, verb, project. I'm thinking if it's called notary, what does that mean? Notary subject, notary descriptor.
Definitely not subject descriptor. I think descriptor is better than subject descriptor.
target. I mean, honestly, oh wait, person, woman, wait, what? Brandon, what are you doing here?
Sorry, you started naming nouns, and so I had to go political on you. It's a Trump joke.
Oh, okay. What was the reason not to do subject descriptor, Shiwei? Shiwei?
Pardon?
What was the reason? You said don't, like, subject descriptor is not good. What was the reason?
It's too long.
Oh, okay. We're gonna do the year 3000 problem. Tianan, Hector, get some additional external voices.
Thinking down the road a little bit, if we did this going forward, signed other stuff in the future, you might want to version it a little bit. Does it make sense to have a name that's more generic and associated and saying that it's notary versus this the descriptor? Because in the future, maybe you wouldn't have just a descriptor in there, you would have some other stuff.
I agree with Brandon.
Then how about keeping
Yeah.
it as it is what we have? We can show anything inside Notary, whatever we want. Right now it says inside Notary there is subject.
So, because this is your PR, right, Brandon? Right now you have it as
Yeah.
notary. So
So
basically,
if you version, you might just have a field at the top that just says, okay, notary, and then the top it just says version 2 on this. And so anything that parses notary would say, oh, I see a version field. Let me check this version 2. Let me run the other parser.
Oh, so versioning is done by a header there. We have versioning somewhere in header, assigned attributes for protected headers. We do versioning
Okay.
by protected headers there. Media type, I think.
Hector, did I hear you say something?
Definitely, I would involve for notary, in my opinion. But yeah, any other names might sound better. Although using generic names that might bring trouble. So I'm doubting as well. Sorry, I cannot help too much here.
No, I'm purposely looking for folks that are one circle, one range out of the circle to get the additional thoughts. So you're saying yes for notary or something else?
No for notary, in my opinion, but
Okay.
missing context.
Tina? I feel like the teacher calling out on the students that are in class.
He put his in a comment.
Oh. Yeah, so the problem with subject is what? Oh, I see. Okay. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by this. Content and signed. I mean, subject is the closest. If we use subject, how broken is this, Shiwei, that it's like, is it just going, who would it be confusing to? It's not going to have a code collision. You're suggesting there'd be some human confusion. Unless it, or would it be a code conflict somewhere? Shiwei?
I'm just thinking.
Okay. So what I'm confused is where is, oh, because you're saying there's a sub property down here. Is that what's we're not showing? What would that look like? Sorry, I'm trying to bring up something here.
I think Shiwei's got the link up in the chat earlier to the IETF.
Yeah, okay, let me just do that. I was trying to bring this up in VS Code and just show it. I was gonna actually type the example. So what we're effectively saying is
From the spec, it sounds like sub's supposed to be like a URL or something, which I think would look pretty okay next to subject that has a digest in it. It'd be very similar.
yeah. So these are all, right, these are all single properties, because this would be some date time thing.
You've got expiration up a couple lines already.
I'm sorry? Oh, I already, yeah, you're right. Thank you. I'm just looking what odd audiences. String or URI value. So what I'm getting at is these are all just strings where whatever we do here actually has a JSON payload within it. So not only is I totally appreciate. In fact, let me just do this just to kind of show a worst case scenario. The fact that one is a single payload where this actually has a JSON payload, does that make people feel more comfortable?
In my opinion, though, they'll contain similar data or should. And if we're using sub correctly, it should be pretty clear that it's related to the subject. Like it visually, it'll probably include the digest, for example. So I think it'll be pretty obvious that these two things are related and are the same thing anyways. So I think it's fine.
Oh, you're saying it is fine. So sub would be the JW. Sorry, is this JWS or JWT?
Yeah.
So I thought you were a no, and now you're saying it's okay.
I was a no, and then I read the spec. Thanks for
Okay.
linking to that, Shiwei. Seeing that it is supposed to be something roughly human readable, unlike most of the JWT things. But seems fine to me. And then the reason I like subject is because it has synergy with the other places that we reference another thing.
So you're talking about like, this is the one that I use here.
Yeah, I know there was a lot of bike shedding that went into this one.
Right.
A lot. And having that conversation settle on subject seems like maybe, given that this is the exact same thing, maybe it's better to just be consistent.
So as long as folks are okay here, like I agree. I that would be, that's where I'm leaning. So I just, because if I understand right, even if we go to Cozy Seaboard, we're saying we would still maintain this. So this is not like, hey, we don't have to argue about this too much because it'll probably change anyway. It's no, this actually would stick. So bike shedding now is less bike shedding later. Put this here. Give everybody a little therapy reminder.
Yeah, that sounds great. Let's just put that straight in JSON. With spaces and all.
Wait. This.
Oh, leave the spaces in. Make it painful for everybody.
Okay, we'll use that one. All right. Going once. Going twice. Brandon, looks like when you merge it, do you merge conflict, rename it to subject, and we'll be good.
Okay.
Okay. Let me copy paste these into our notes here. Where was our notes?
I'll keep going. Include the naming is hard.
I'm so tempted. Oh, wow. Somebody's been busy. Thank you, whoever's doing that.
Are the notes from last meeting?
Oh, did I get in the wrong one?
Yeah, looks
Yes,
like.
I did. Thank you. Hold on, let me just paste this here. I was like, wow, somebody got really busy. And come down over here. Let's select it. Put it over here. The JWS or JWT, sorry. Which one was this one? JWT, okay. You say that this is expanded form? Fair? Okay, so Okay, we good? Formatting here.
Ready to move on to the trust policy?
Cool.
Basically, I have published this like around a couple of months back, we discussed about adding the scope thing to trust policy based on the registry and the namespace. I have like posted a PR for that with some additional changes. Oh, Brandon took a look. Yeah, I just wanted a couple of feedback on that, so we can iterate over it.
Yeah, my feedback probably gets to or potentially solving this different ways depending on how you think about the problem. And so my thought process is you just go through all the policies one by one. If any one policy matches, then you say you're good. And I think you're trying to find a specific policy to verify and then only verify that one policy.
Yep, I don't want to leave an ambiguity there. It's like there shouldn't be, like, as it's like final check, it's a verification thing. Don't want to leave any ambiguity that, okay, person went and configured two policies, but he forgot, and it's one is a wild card which matches everything, and now everything is passing, but it should fail. Like it should be a conscious call if they want to do it. It should not be by mistake.
Yeah, the scenarios I'm thinking of are people would have potentially multiple keys that they want a wildcard in the same namespace. So you've got like the security team approving stuff. You've got your CI server going in or your external ingestion of upstream resources, and it's all in your local registry namespace. And so do you need to put all the keys in the same policy at that point?
Yeah, we can specify trustor names. Trustor name contains the key information. So you can like add as many trustor names you want, and we can get the key information from the same policy.
Brandon, was your scenario additive, like it both or n keys must match or one of n keys must match? How do we delineate the difference?
I don't think we've got the n keys must match scenario yet.
Okay, so your
so right
scenario
now I'm
was
at least
it's one of these has to match.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see an n key match policy if we can get it, but until we get there, I'll just settle for one.
So if we were to add n keys, would that change this format? Would we rename something?
Given the trust stores as a list, that might actually solve some of my concerns there. At least having the multiple keys in the same area. And then when you try to add the n, since you've got the multiple trust stores, it might just be find in out of that list. And so you just add an extra field and say, minimum matches is 2 on your trust stores. And then you have to find 2 trust stores to verify that same signature or set of signatures. So that would cover half. I'll pause there for comments before I jump to the other. Okay, so the other one I was thinking of is whether scope should support wildcards. And the logic there is you've got like prefix matches right now for this stuff, but a lot of organizations are going to have multiple registry servers. And so they might want to say match all the registry servers within our domain.
So the concern I have with wildcards like that cross is similar to the fall through squatting kind of problems. If you look at some of the stuff we've been looking at with the repo map, the registry repo mapping, basically we're saying we try not to do wildcards, and actually it's very deterministic, so that there's no possibility of a squatting and something can leak through. So that's the piece that makes me a little nervous. And even in ACR, we've been doing more repository-based permissions. And every time we go down a wildcard path, that just seems like the threat model opens up scary potentials.
Yeah, so I think there's kind of like 2 different approaches here. Because in TUF, we do allow wildcard matching, but we do it by using the prioritized, we prioritize these things. So you could have a more specific one and then a wildcard one, and the more specific one is prioritized over the wildcard. And so you can like have subsets of the wildcard domain. If you're instead going to go the route where you say there's just a one-to-one mapping, we have, this policy, this domain. I think the wildcards become a little bit trickier unless you really do mean every single thing in this domain, no exceptions, right? Because in order to have those exceptions, you need a concept of prioritization in order to get that deterministic mapping. So I think it's just, I think you can make it work. I think it's just a choice of how it's implemented.
And Brendan, let me just confirm, when you say wildcards, there's a difference between starts with and below this namespace.
Yeah, right now we've got the prefix match. And so theoretically that would match. You could say registry.io.org/namespace, and that would match both of those foo and bar. But if you've got two different registries.
Like, this is the one that
Worries you.
This one seems, I know I'm typing my opinion. I'm trying not to, I'm just trying to do the naming thing, but this is the one that gives me a little concern.
So
Sorry,
the one I'm trying to solve is you might have a prod and a stage registry or a build environment registry or an external whatever. All those different registries out there within your registry.io namespace. So not even there, but the registry name itself is different.
Oh, I see.
So it would be prod.registry.io. And I would put a different host name, not a different domain name.
Yeah. I always love this pattern, and the network folks always freak out at me when I do this. I'm doing different names, but anyway, different story. But regardless, the point is that there's different registries. The thing is, this one I'm trying to actually solve in a different place where basically this should not be part of it anyway, because you provide that, like, this isn't just a problem for policy. Your image, if it's got that embedded in it, it's kind of hard to promote that image name across to, well, not the image, sorry. If your deployment chart, whether it be a Helm chart, whether it be a pod spec, whether it be cloud provider specific technology format, anytime it has the registry name in it, it makes it really really difficult to do exactly what you've done here.
So this kind of goes into the promotion. So if you've got your image in dev org namespace foo and you promote it over to prod, it'll be nice to be able to have a trust policy. It just says, I don't care what the registry name is, as long as it is within my company domain. I
guess I would do a counter argument, which is that you probably want to add, you might want to add some additional checks for prod anyway. You might want to make sure that the dev stuff happened before then promoting it. But I guess there's probably cases where you want the same policy.
I think the prod policy would, in production, is just going to say we're specifically only allowing prod, but the developers might want to be able to run either.
Yeah, for example, in dev and prod policy might be different. We might want to allow some registries to ignore, like we might want to allow some unsigned artifacts and things like that, but in prod we might not want to allow.
So the keys are different in the policy for the different environments. That's the typical. It's not just, yes, the registry names change because one's in a VNet, one's in a different VNet, whatever, but you actually require different keys to be in the next environment. It might even be two different production environments that require standard trust and high trust, just as a more generic.
Yep. Yeah,
so
and
the
also
policy itself is different.
Yep, and also keys should be different for sure in dev and prod. You cannot touch dev and prod.
So if we say we're not going to permit a wildcard in there, would it make sense to allow a list for the scope instead of just one field for the scope, so you're not copying and pasting for every single registry you add?
That idea, like, of just saying, like, you can list the registries that this applies to. Yeah. Because otherwise you have a lot of duplicate info in there, which is just annoying.
But I'd like to make sure we could support something like this. so that if there is a set of policies that you're putting on something, then the registry name actually is a configuration. And then it is a path. So if I do, what happens then if I have a reference, that's my pod spec, so hold on, let me just, if I'm foo V1, let's just say, then these in the policy, if I make these the policies, then I can actually apply the same policy across two different locations because the registry is just a parameter that's passed in.
To throw another example out there, you might have US East 1 registry, US East 2 registry, US West 1 registry for all your different regions, and
Yeah, exactly.
a bunch of different
That's another great
registries,
place.
but it's the same set of images.
Yeah, I noticed that AWS does, they stick the regions in the actual registry URL where we've specifically pulled that out to avoid that complication, but there's different, that solves the geo-replication problem, but it doesn't solve the promotion environment. So yeah, the region thing is just another example of that. In fact, we had the same thing even in China and other clouds where the domain itself is different.
And I don't know, in that case, if it would make sense to have the wildcard in the middle of the string in that case, if it's like your team name dot region dot registry.com.
Why couldn't you just replace the whole registry then? Yes, see what you're saying. You can make the region be the wildcard and at least the registry is embedded.
The challenge, I wouldn't say issue necessarily. The challenge, I think, with putting the whole registry as wildcard is that I could make my own registry, add this org namespace through in my registry, and then upload like, you know, a bunch of garbage to it. Whereas if you have the domain at the end, it's much harder to do that, right? Because you control the domain, and so it can prevent me from making a registry there.
Fair, but I guess I would suggest if you could, the configuration that we're talking about is also the same configuration that says which database you connect to. It could be the same thing that does your DNS resolution, your host file. So some of these things we defer to security around it. And
yeah, I guess you'd have to compromise a bunch of other things to make that attack work, which would be hard.
Yeah.
So that might be enough layers that we don't need this one.
And quite frankly, if you did switch it to another registry, they still have to have it signed with the right keys.
Yeah, I guess you could move it, I guess, an old image with the signature, but yeah, you couldn't, yeah, because you don't have the signing key, so you can't actually do anything real.
But this is kind of fallback attack possible here where I just move different registry and just this bypasses to check.
Say that again, Pradesh?
I mean, it reduces readability also because we don't know if it applies now to all registries.
Oh, sorry, you're saying in this example?
Yeah.
There's a place where registry.
Yeah, that uses the readability because to figure out now which registry I have to look at two places. And which can be substituted dynamically, I'm assuming that.
It is dynamic. It's basically there's a runtime replacement, but it's deterministic. It's not, there's no fall through. And honestly, we haven't finished the design of this, but I try to be protective of, I want to make sure that if we can achieve this design, which honestly, we have to at least within Azure. I don't know if we solve it industry-wide, which I'd love to, but I have to solve this at least within Azure. That there's no, all the feedback I've gotten is everybody reacts to, I don't want a squatting potential. And I totally agree. So we're trying to make sure it's very explicit. I call it deterministic, you can call it explicit, whatever you want to call. There's no listing or fall through cache. If you were able to change that configuration, you could change all kinds of other configuration variables as well. So it would be just as secure as other configuration changes. So I think the main thing that I'm trying to avoid is this scenario or worse, basically replacements in the middle.
That scenario is still possible with prefix match.
Well, that's what I'm suggesting. It's not really a regex per se. It's more of,
No, but still the prefix match, what I have raised the PR for, that scenario is still possible with prefix match, because slash name will match with like anything after you have like namespace or name something something. It will still match. It's a prefix based match in the PR at least.
Mhm.
So in namespace, we'll just look for prefix, not for like particular slashes or repository name.
It's not a namespace concept. It's a string concept.
Yep.
Thoughts? Where else has this been used? I'm not talking about just signing, like other pathing solutions. Where is it? Call that out here, actually. Do you have, wait, I've lost track. Do we have wildcarding in the PR right now?
No, we don't have a wildcard. We had that in the discussion, and in discussion we made a decision that we don't want. If you open, there's a discussion there. I think in the description of the PR, I have put the link of a discussion there. We did discuss about wildcard somewhere in the discussion, I think, in the description. Let me get the link.
All right, we've got 2 minutes. Doesn't sound like we're gonna get closure here. So why don't we bike shed this a little bit more? I'd love to see some implementations of this and experiment that way. Like maybe we do it without wildcards and we test this. Like what are the, or I'd actually probably do more of, let's write a couple of, and I've been wanting to do this obviously in back in the root requirements, you know, in the notary project. I think it was here. Yeah, I talk about this, but I never actually went to the next level of detail saying like, what is the actual registry names? And honestly, in this, all the way in Acme Rockets, what happens between dev staging and prod and dev, and then when you have team A, team B, dev staging prod, what is the canonical example of this? And I actually have the Wabbit Networks IO domain and Acme Rockets IO domain, or some derivation of those. So we could stand up some of these and explore it. So I probably want to at least write up some kind of use case scenarios and test that at least in Markdown, and then turn that into maybe as some code to see if we're comfortable with it. Maybe we get comfortable enough with just writing down the domains in Markdown. What do folks think? Pritesh?
Sounds good to me, but I don't have all the scenarios.
That's fine. So when we do this, just let's wrap up and we'll take a moment to review here. Oops. Who's scribbling here?
That's me. I was throwing an example out there for
Okay, perfect. That's exactly
Everno
what I was looking for.
itself using wildcards.
Here's one more example where they use something like scoping, namespace validation in corners here.
Okay. With that, thank you to everyone who's been participating. It's been with this on the distribution spec. It's, there's been a lot of challenges over the last 2 years between personal work, this global pandemic, and I know everybody's been getting stressed for multiple directions. And I really appreciate everybody's contributions and patience and passions to try to land a great solution. So thank you.
Are we going to skip the next two?
That was the proposal. Is, not that anybody, Slack is always there for conversations, but we were going to not hold the meetings and just give folks that want to work a chance to work asynchronously. I've seen lots of creative stuff happen over holiday breaks, and I've seen people just wind down, completely detach, and have an epiphany idea at 60 meters down in the water. I don't know if 60 meters is the right one. So give people the choice on how they want to operate over the next couple of weeks, but we would cancel the meetings.
Okay.
And we'll get a doodle out for where we'll have the meetings for the new year. And Happy New Year. Enjoy some time with your families and friends. And thank you.
Happy New Year too. Merry Christmas. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.